Okay, it's 7:06. Okay, welcome everybody. It looks like we've got about 69 people here, or 67 participants right now, so we'll get started. Reason why we're having a community meeting is this is on the East Palo Alto Opportunities to Purchase Act, aka OPA or COPA. That's Opportunity to Purchase or Community Opportunity to Purchase Act. So there's a lot of concerns about this, and we're trying to right now kind of get our hands around an act that was kind of snuck in here, and a lot of people were not prepared for. So, Abel, if you wanted to start, I think we're going to start the meeting. So if you want to start chatting right now, we'll get going on this. So the meeting tonight is going to be a short overview of OPA. We'll have a community discussion, which will be most of the evening. And then we're going to be doing next steps, political and legal challenges if this doesn't go forward. So just a little bit of background on East Palo Alto homeowners. EPA apparently has about 3,600 single-family homes, and of those, 2,500 are owner-occupied, and 1,100 are rentals. So more than 2 to 1 are actually people who, like me, live in the house that they purchased. I think this is a well-known fact, but something you got to say explicitly, that homes are the single biggest asset in most families' wealth, cornerstone of the middle-class life and a path to financial freedom. Houses for people all over the United States have been a way for them to advance financially. And then many families in East Palo Alto have built up generational wealth using real estate investments. I think that's something that has to be stated up front, because there's a lot of people here who moved in the 1950s who have invested in real estate. What I feel, and I think a lot of people feel, is that this was kind of a sneak attack on homeowners. Carlos Romero and city staff added OPA to the Tuesday, November 16th City Council meeting on Saturday, November 13th. The only prior discussion was on October 5th at a City Council meeting where the discussion happened after 10 p.m. I spoke to at least one City Council member who did not read the ordinance prior to the City Council meeting. And Carlos Romero tried to waive the first reading of the ordinance and accelerate the process of adapting it into law. This is all fact, and it's on the record. There was no publicity on the city's website, in the city's email newsletter, or on Facebook, Nextdoor, or Twitter. And the city only mailed paper notices via the U.S. Postal Service of the proposed ordinance until after the November 16th meeting. So if you weren't online, kind of tough luck. You're not going to see that. So. And then few, if any, EPA homeowners and landlords were aware of this ordinance until the day of the meeting. And then it goes without saying, or not going without saying, but it was not translated into Spanish, Chinese, or other languages. Is there a problem with the translation? Is there, I'm seeing a message here. Okay, let me just keep going then. There was very limited community outreach, none of them to homeowners. You can see this below. This is the groups that were connected. The only one that would vaguely resemble homeowners in East Palo Alto might be the Rotary Club. And that's one that not only do they have, I think it's $200 a year charge to join, but it also is made up of predominantly people from outside the community. So what is the Opportunity to Purchase Act? The purpose of this is just straight from the ordinance. So this chapter is to confirm upon tenants, qualified nonprofits in the city of EPA, potential eligible purchases, a right of first refusal upon the transfer or sale of residential properties is defined herein to prevent displacement of lower income tenants, to facilitate ownership for residents, to create more affordable housing opportunities in East Palo Alto. So the way they wrote this, every home that's rented out is affected by this law. Every home that has an ADU is affected by this law. One of the analysis of this is it's a better soundbite to say tenants have purchased the building, when in reality, It is behemoth and well-funded entities that are standing by to become the new landlord. So the landlord is, these are not going to be, the tenants may be part of the transaction, but they're not going to be the owners at the end of it. So OPA's target is EPA homeowners. OPA and COPA does not affect Woodland Park apartments or other major corporations. It's squarely aimed at mom and pop who have an ADU, rent out a house, and other small landlords. Unlike other cities' OPA ordinances, single-family homes and ADUs are not excluded from it. In both Washington, D.C. and San Francisco, the ordinances are only applied to apartments and excludes single-family homes. OPA will delay and obstruct real estate transactions. For a lot of analysis says the law will make it impossible to sell or buy a house under the ordinance in less than 200 days in EPA, making it impossible for current residents to buy and current residents to sell homes. Who's going to make an offer in June and wait until November to see if an offer is accepted? It also affects mortgages. When a mortgage is locked, the buyer has 30 days to complete the transaction. These delays destroy a normal home buyer's ability to purchase property. Also, 1031 exchanges, which are an important tax tool, are impossible with the prolonged timelines of OPA. This is the incredible diagram of how you get from what today is a 30-day transaction, to sell a house, to over 200 days. I don't want to go into detail here, but you can see there's all sorts of 30-day, 60-day, 90-day delays. There's a whole lot in here that I'm sure other people are going to talk about, but it's something to realize that this is the convoluted method by which they want to sell houses. Part of this is the appraisals, where if the nonprofit doesn't agree with the sale price, that thinks it's too high, they can request an appraisal, which caps the price below below market price or a third-party offer. In the Bay hot property market, appraisals can be hundreds of thousands below the market price. It's a huge financial loss to homeowners looking to sell. That was a comment made by Zened. And then Varun made another comment: why can't the tenant, city, nonprofit simply bid as part of the normal bidding process? Why have all the legalese around asking them to bid independently first before opening the property to third parties, and then asking them to match the bid again? Seems like this is being designed to specifically slow down the process, tire out the homeowner into accepting a less optimal offer. OPA will lower property values. If OPA, some of the consequences of this, if this lowers the property value by 10%, the overall cost to EPA homeowners would be around $360 million in equity. 20% would be around $750 million. You can play with the numbers, but it's a substantial amount of money. And lower equity can lead to foreclosures, inability to refinance, predatory loans. We could have a revisiting of the mortgage crisis of 2008 in a really worst case scenario. Resident homeowners are impacted as well. A gentleman named Tom made this comment: this will affect all homeowners in EPA, not just rental owners. By adding considerable delay in an outside appraisal will lower the achievable sale price of rental homes, which represent a significant purchase of EPA homes, and possibly more than 50%. When somebody goes to purchase a home in EPA that hasn't been rented, the bank financing of the new mortgage will do an appraisal. The maximum mortgage the bank will fund will be based on the recent sale price of similar homes in EPA, but this comparable search does not differentiate based on rental versus owner occupied. This means a decrease in sale price of any single family home will affect all others, and the high percentage of rental homes in EPA will amplify this reduction in value. As such, this proposal is placing a one-sided burden on people who have bought into our town. There's also concerns about lost tax revenue. East Palo Alto will lose at least $15,000 in annual property tax revenue for each house that is bought and converted to nonprofit housing. This weakens the tax base, lowers the pot of money available for city services, parks, schools, and other uses. And then there's also legal and economic effects. There's huge issues with the constitutionality of this law, and if passed, the city will receive multiple lawsuits. And how much will East Palo Alto spend in legal fees defending a law that is unconstitutional? And isn't that money better spent on creating real solutions to housing? And then mortgages, one possibility is, will mortgage banks even underwrite loans to buy East Palo Alto property if OPA is passed? I can easily imagine loans would become more expensive and harder to get with OPA, leading to a return to redlining, which is when banks did not want to loan to home buyers in East Palo Alto. Being able to rent out your home is a fundamental aspect of its value, and if there's unacceptable terms to the house at the point of sale, surely this has an impact on mortgages. That was, and then the real question is, does OPA solve displacement in housing? No, OPA strongly discourages homeowners to build ADUs, something that directly contradicts the city's plan to have infill development and more affordable housing options. By having it apply to ADUs, I've personally talked to probably 10 people who have said that they're not moving forward with their ADUs right now. And then single family homes, if you do want to solve housing issues and displacement issues, it's the most expensive way to house people. And any nonprofit that's really serious about housing isn't going to use single family homes as the model to provide affordable housing. It would be kind of like trying to get transportation and use Tesla, Mercedes-Benz, other luxury brands instead of a bus, for instance. This law, if passed, is going to have a negligible effect on providing affordable housing, but it will destroy home values and EPA and cause all of the other issues we discussed. We also want to say this law is a strong disincentive to build new housing in East Palo Alto. Who's going to invest in a new apartment building in EPA knowing that they can only sell to a nonprofit at a reduced price? So, and then to wrap up, are there solutions to displacement? Absolutely. We need to build more housing. Nobody's denying that. When the Light Tree Apartments open next year, it's going to be the first new apartment building in EPA in over 15 years. We can build more housing in East Palo Alto, come up with alternatives to OPA to address issues of housing and displacement. OPA is not going to expand housing in EPA. It's going to shrink the supply. And then, overall, what are next steps? I'm sure we're going to discuss this a little bit more, but there's a city staff meeting on December 1st at 6 p.m., which if you don't have a Zoom invite, we'll certainly try to get that to you. And then there's a city council meeting on December 7th. And then we want people to write and call and talk to our city council members prior to the meeting, to let them know how we feel as homeowners. So I'm going to stop sharing right now. And then, we're up to 97 people and one raised hand. I guess I'd like to ask that Robert Jones talks a little bit about this. He's spent a lot of time analyzing it. And, we'd like to have him. Robert is the former head of EPA Can Do. He's on the fire board. He's been deeply involved in East Palo Alto for a long time. And so I'm going to make him the speaker right now. So go Robert, go.
Go Robert, go. Thank you, Mark. I think you have done an excellent job. From the documents, the one document I have looked at, the overview that the city put out, staff report. I think you covered the essence of the staff report and what's at stake right now. Some of the takeaways that when I looked at the document myself, I've looked at it from the perspective of really trying to understand what the city is trying to do within the city. I've been around here for over 40 plus years, and part of and engaged in real estate matters in the city for a little over 30 years. And so part of what I see, what is taking place is that the city is really trying to utilize the existing homes as a way of which to increase individuals who don't necessarily have the means to purchase a home, especially when you start looking at trying to make the houses affordable to individuals within the 30 to 50% range. And that's the number that I saw. And that's part of taking the median income or the income for individuals within that price range. And anybody that's in real estate and bought and sold houses know that when you start looking at, that range, you oftentimes would have to, what would come with that. If you were buying a house back in the 60s, you probably would have been, and having the same level of income, you probably would have been able to buy a house. In today's marketplace, with the home, where the homes are now, the prices where they are now, it's extremely difficult for an individual to buy. And I think, to me, that's where the cities, I think, is really taking a wrong turn in trying to make, trying to utilize existing homes and homeowners where they currently are to try to purchase a house. Because when I looked at and like I say, my analysis is based on trying to, one, look at trying to understand where this train got derailed at and the approach. And it goes back almost 30 years when people was in the community started talking about people moving in. And I was selling real estate here around that period of time. And so people, when a house got up to $100,000, people were saying that, it was outrageous, and people coming into this community are going to gentrify community because they was purchasing the house at $100,000. Well, today that $100,000, people wish anybody bought a house, wish they would be able to buy a house for $100,000. But because of the development that have taken place around us in other areas of Silicon Valley, that only East Palo Alto became the last place where people who wanted to have a home and to raise their family and their kids was only the last area and they want to stay in the community, was the last area where they can do that. And that's why the migration from other areas took place in East Palo Alto. And everybody know what they in real estate and business, look at our economy now. When there's a shortage of supply, guess what happens? The demand for that goes up. And so people start increasing the prices on things because they may want it, because that's the place they want to live. So now they trying to utilize that where the property values are to try to get individuals who are at those levels into home ownership. But what the interesting thing about it is that the three stages or the three prongs that they're looking for. First, they're looking for tenants to make this bid. And if the tenants don't bid on the property, then they move into the qualified nonprofit organizations. And right now, I understand there's three qualified nonprofit organizations that they're looking at, the city's looking at, to purchase a property if the tenant doesn't. And then if the qualified nonprofit doesn't purchase, then the city will step in. But the city is not into property management, so they were going to have to turn it over, if they're able to purchase a property, turn over to that qualified nonprofit organization. But there's a little piece in there between the tenants making an offer and purchasing, and not making an offer. If they decide they can't, then they have the option to transfer their rights over to the nonprofit, the qualified nonprofit. And I found that astounding that why even put in such an ordinance on the act, knowing that people will not be able to purchase at their current income, because they're talking about the report on the city said the average income here is about $67,000 for people that are going to fall into that particular category. It's not saying how they're going to come up with the down payment. It's not saying what kind of loan they're going to get and from whom they're going to be able to get the loan from. If the city got that much, if city's going to be the financier of this, they're going to subsidize this. Where is the city's going to get their funds from? I know I've been to a couple of meetings in the Ravenswood in the industrial area. They're talking about feeling that they're being hijacked a little bit by the city over the fact that some of the fees and things, concessionary things that is being asked of them. The question becomes, how can they make it affordable? Well, that's the price of development, and somewhere they come up with that to make that happen. But with affordable housing, you're always looking for subsidies in order to drive down the cost so that you can provide rents at the lower level. And the question is, where the city is going to get that money, where the nonprofit is going to get that money. I know there's foundations out there that offer offering money to help subsidize housing projects. There are certain finances at the state that can come in to help subsidize. But the key to it for me is that now, if a transaction goes through, and if the buyer was the tenant purchased it, and don't get me wrong, I'm not into my thoughts are not anti having tenants to purchase or anyone purchase, but once the house is purchased and taken off the roll, the tax roll, if they go to a nonprofit get a discount on the taxes to no taxes. They pay no taxes on that particular property. So now, as Mark mentioned earlier, some of the lost revenues and income from the city would be substantial, massive. And when I hear that there's about 1,100 rental units that could conceivably go into that, be a part of this pool, outside of whether you live in the property or not, but rental units, and if it go into the nonprofit and you take it off the tax roll, then that's lost revenues for the city. And I think the focus to me, and I'm gonna close on this, because there's so much in here that I want to say after looking at it, but I know when to get off the air, let everybody else could come on and talk. But when I looked at the whole idea of what the scare tactic of, that the city is being gentrified, and understanding what gentrification really means, and I came across this information through my research and trying to really kind of grasp with what is gentrification. It talked about a process of neighborhood change, which include economic change in those areas which historically has been disinvested. These are neighborhoods like East Palo Alto have, because people didn't want to really move here. Only certain folks migrating out of San Francisco and San Jose settled in East Palo Alto in the 60s and the 70s. And I was one of those one of those people that did, because it was affordable. It also, when you start looking at gentrification, the whole notion and what changes neighborhood have been real estate investment into those communities, where they're building more houses or apartments, or bringing in industry into the area. And with that comes a new, higher income level of individuals. And like I say, the migration really jumped off in East Palo Alto around, I guess, the late mid 90s, when they started building University Square. Some other affordable housing projects went up, and people and IKEA came in, Home Depot came in. People had a second look at East Palo Alto. So that's part of change. The key to it, to me, is that what is the city's the goal for gentrification should be, if this is occurring here in the city. One, it should look at investment into the community, and those investments should be related to infrastructure, and it should be related around advancing the people that are here. Nothing really has been said about putting together more, a lot of our population during the foreclosure crisis, there was a good number of people that lost their houses because they didn't know how to manage their money. They didn't understand how to do that. And as a result, when they got a house, they was able to get in, but they weren't able to keep it. So that's a critical element if you're going to get people into, even if they're just renting, that's very important to do that. So I think that once a neighborhood is beginning to uplift itself and build itself up, then there can be new funds flowing through the community, through businesses, as well as the current owners that own the property, that can contribute to the tax roll, rather than taking it off the tax roll and creating a void of income into the community. So with that said, I'm just going to leave it right there, because like I said, I have another hour worth of conversation I can have on this subject matter. So Mark, I'm gonna just leave it at that.
Yeah, thanks. Reminder that if you want to talk, raise your hand and we can get you on video. Is anyone, Zenab, would you like to share your thoughts on this at all? I know you have analyzed this as much as I have. We're all concerned for different reasons, but I think it would be a good idea for folks to share what their concerns are about this ordinance and what they're thinking right now.
Of course, yes. Hi, everyone. Good evening. Actually, I have a lot of the same concerns that you already covered, but there is a few points more I like to highlight. And I have 2 slides I will share. Maybe it's easier to put my, let me see if I can share. Okay. Do you see my slide?
Yes, we do.
Okay, great. Yeah. So most of the concerns, as I said, it was covered, so I didn't want to repeat, but there is one point that was very concerning for me in the current proposal, which was the long-term affordability clause states that single-family homes that are purchased with this ordinance are not subject to rental affordability or sale value restrictions, as you can see here in the long-term affordability clause. And this actually is very concerning because it defeats the whole purpose and allows new purchasers like nonprofits, corporations to buy single-family homes at a discounted price capped by an appraisal, and then rent them out for profit or resell them at market price. So single-family homes here are not regulated, that are purchased by this ordinance will not. So this does not maintain the same purpose of long-term affordability that they want to create with this ordinance. So this was a main concern for me. And then the other concerns that I'm really concerned that this whole ordinance will just bring the adverse effects or negative effects on housing affordability by it will discourage homeowners from building and renting out ADUs, which are effective solution to provide affordable housing in Bay Area. It will discourage developers from developing multi-story apartment buildings, which will be much more affordable than single-family homes. And that's what we need. We need more multi-story apartment buildings, basic apartments that can be affordable, half the price of a single-family home. And then it will discourage people from renting out properties. So if I have to move for a job or a family crisis, I will think it twice before leasing my home, renting out my home and moving. I will probably just sell it and move, and that will just create less rental properties in EPA, which might be the preferred solution for many families. Many families want flexibility, and rental is a good option for them. It's even could be more affordable right now than buying $1 million home, single family home. That's the average price of single family homes in EPA now. And then, of course, which the others mentioned, it will deprive the city from property taxes when we prioritize nonprofits and they don't pay taxes. And that money could have helped in developing programs to offer affordable housing, could have improved our infrastructures, our schools, and did a lot of good things to our community. So these are the main things that I was, besides all the other concerns that were already mentioned. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you,
Thank
Zainab.
you, everyone. Yeah, thank you, everyone.
Excellent. And then I think you have to stop your screen share.
Yes, let me do that. Did it stop already?
It did not. You have to.
Okay, let me see. How do I do that?
Mark, can I
Sorry.
add one thing while she's?
Yeah, Bob, go ahead. Yeah, absolutely.
One of the things that struck me in what the document I read, that she brought the speaker brought it out in terms of the creating a land trust to move the houses into is what is the way that they're looking to try to create this long-term affordable houses. Once it goes into the land trust, it's in there in perpetuity. And so as a result, whatever dollar amount that was gonna, the intent was to create the value or money from the tax roll is gone in perpetuity until the land trust go out of business or dissolve itself.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. And it's a very concerning point. It's interesting to see that the people who wrote this ordinance and sponsored this ordinance are also the ones that are the primary beneficiaries of this ordinance. So that's something that we can all keep in mind here. Varun, did you want to go? I'm going to ask you to unmute. You can talk.
Of course. Hey guys. Yeah, so I'm a new homeowner. Recently moved to East Palo Alto like a year back. So yeah, I think my point, what I'm kind of noticing here, right, is that I feel the people who wrote this ordinance, I think they likely know, right, all the things we are talking about here, right, in the sense that that this is honest. This doesn't feel like it was written specifically for the low income tenants, right? It doesn't feel like, as Bob mentioned, right, that those guys would anyways be able to afford this house or these kind of housing prices. So I think knowing that, I'm kind of like becoming a bit skeptical, in the sense that whatever we say, like, would that really make a difference, right? During these council discussions. And if not, if the city leaders are pretty motivated to pass this anyways, because they likely wrote this like irrespective of the harm, right, which this will cause to the homeowners. What is the kind of recourse which is available to us, right, thereafter? It does feel that it has so many like harmful clauses in this. So I'm kind of curious, and maybe we can park this question for later. But I'm kind of like, it just feels that there's so many holes, right, or so many problems with this, and it's still kind of is getting pushed forward. Um, I sometimes kind of like I'm worried about what the real intent is, and regardless of what we say, right, they might still want to move forward with this.
Yeah, those are all good points. Thank you, Varun. And there are enough, I've had several lawyers contact me about this, and there's enough holes in this ordinance to drive Mack truck through. I mean, they're really, there's a lot of, there wasn't a lot of thought put to this ordinance. I mean, if you can't on one day say build an ADU, and then the next day, and this is what the city has done, tell everybody, well, if you build an ADU, we're going to delay your sale of your home so you can only sell to big institutions like BlackRock, who buys up houses, and these nonprofits. There was a question, I think Imani Brown said, could somebody talk more about why owners are discouraged from building ADUs if they have no plans to sell? Well, I would think that a house is an asset like any other, and for everybody that's going to live in East Palo Alto for the rest of their life, there's also people who may at one point sell a house for any number of reasons. And Grace had a long list of, or not a long list, had a few scenarios. People could build an ADU and get transferred by a job. They could have all sorts of reasons, but I don't know, Grace, if you're feeling up to it, would you want to go over some of the scenarios that you had on how this would snag people?
Well, I could do, but it's also the case that those scenarios are now posted on a great website that has been set up, which is at noepaopa.com. So anybody who wants to can read some longer scenarios there. If you go through, there are some headings at the top and it says scenarios. If you click on that, there's 3 examples of different potential possible EPA homeowners who could get stung in different ways by this ordinance. So rather than going through all the detail here, I think I'm very much interested in what we need to do next to persuade our council members to vote against this. There are certainly some homeowner scenarios which you can see there at the website, noepaopa.com. And I'm interested in having people's insights on what would make each individual council member want to vote against this. And I myself don't have great insight into that, but I would like to know more. No, yes, that's the website, noepaopa.com.
Maybe you could throw that into a chat. I guess I'll take my, take attempt at that. I think, you don't want people, so why, if somebody's not planning on selling, well, I'm not planning on selling my house. We have 2 houses. We've both lived in both of them, one for 5 years, one for 5 years. And then I moved back to one house for a year because we thought there was construction. And then we moved back to the other house. So it's been, we have 2 houses in East Palo Alto. I may sell one of them at some point. I may not. But at the end of the day, I think where a lot of people feel is that the government and our local government shouldn't penalize East Palo Alto homeowners for being homeowners. And there's been, somebody made the point last week, why of all the cities in the country would we be the only ones that have OPA? Why would we be the only ones where we're penalized like this if we want to sell a house that we rented out? There are a lot of scenarios, and presuming that not everybody's going to go to the website that Grace mentioned, some people might get a job. They might say, hey, they're going to rent out their house for a while, and they'll move to another part of the country. Or I was talking to one of our former mayors who's in Philadelphia right now visiting a grandchild and her son, and may want to sell at some point, but also has a property that they can develop ADUs on. So we want to encourage ADU development, and I don't think you can say that somebody would never sell their house. That's just simply not true. I mean, you have long-term folks here who own, many houses or properties who you would want them to develop more housing, not less. If anyone wants to talk, just raise your hand. We'll get you here. It looks like Jennifer Liu would like to talk. I'm going to add you right now, Jennifer.
Hi, my name is Jennifer Liu. The East Palo Alto, I, as well as a bunch of East Palo Alto homeowners, we send out many letters to East Palo Alto homeowners. We send out about 840 letters, including the flyer against the OPA, as well as we also attach a letter. Let everybody fill out your name and sign it and mail to the city council to go against this OPA. So basically, for this OPA, we think that it grants the city the authority to dictate who you can sell your own home to and when and how. We lose control of our homes. So this OPA takes away our property rights that's granted by the American Constitution. It destroys our home equity because regardless whether it's a rental as well as our own residence, as Mark mentioned that when we are doing the appraisal, everybody's home value will drop. And also OPA drags the selling process up to 9 months, depending on the type of the property. Yeah, it ranges from 2-3 months up to 9 months. So when you have an urgent need to sell your home to get some cash out for emergency case, you cannot. You just need to go through all the complicated process of this OPA. And it also hurts the tenants as well as the homeowners, because the overall home ownership have the costs have significantly increased. It will be passed over to the tenants to pay higher rents. Overall, OPA makes East Palo Alto undesirable. When people think about all these hassles, buyers would hesitate buying properties in East Palo Alto. Yeah, so this time, I really love East Palo Alto, and this OPA made people afraid of East Palo Alto. So we need to work together to fight against it. Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer. When we go to Tom Wedlick next.
Hi, thank you, Mark, for organizing. I wanted to note two things. One, there's been a question a few times saying, why does this only affect ADUs? It doesn't only affect ADUs. My understanding is that this new up to 200-day process would affect all homes that haven't been owner occupied for the last 6 months, or end homes with an ADU. So basically, if you've rented your home, you'd be affected. If you have an ADU, you'd be affected. Or if you just haven't lived in it for 6 months, because, for example, the person who owns the home, got sick, was in the hospital, was in a nursing home, again, you'd be affected. And then once those homes are affected, those affected homes are going to drag down the cost of all homes in East Palo Alto. So this isn't just affecting, these rental homes and these investment properties. It's affecting all homes. And that effect is going to lower the EPA tax basis. And it's also going to hurt homeowners. If we want to refinance our mortgage, we now have less equity in the home. Our refinance rates are going to be higher. So it really is a dilution of homeowners, and it will hurt all of EPA and make people not want to move into this town if they think that their investment is not secure. Thank you.
That's a good point, Tom. And I hadn't even thought about if you're not occupied, but I know a lot of people who are doing construction projects where they might move out for over 6 months and would be affected by that. And I'm curious if that, if this ordinance, if you're doing a big home reconstruction, whether you'd be affected by it technically, even though you're still intending to move back in. I don't know. It's interesting. I guess you'd have to try to sell it, but if you did a renovation and then decided to sell a house after renovating it, whether that would qualify even if it was owner occupied. Court, why don't you go ahead?
Okay. Well, one of the concerns I have about listening to this conversation is that we're sort of in the same pickle that the people that wrote the ordinance are. They talked to people who were in full support of the ordinance, and we're now sitting here talking to people who are in full opposition to the ordinance. And at some point, I think if we're going to make things right, we got to get together so that both sides can understand where the other's coming from and move to a place that actually does something useful for the city. I have noticed that even at the last meeting, the appraisal apparently was planned to be eliminated from the text of the ordinance. And recently I've heard that the ADU stipulation is also going to be eliminated. I'm not sure how much has to be eliminated, if not the whole thing, in order for it to be acceptable to everyone. And I think that's really important, that it's acceptable to everyone, or at least it becomes understood that you can't put together an ordinance that doesn't have sort of wide popular appeal. And that means you sort of got to understand who the audience is that you're trying to get wide popular appeal. And clearly, the city council has not done that. Now, a couple of other things that are of concern to me. One is the enforcement issue. In the past, we have put together BMR ordinances, which allows a developer to come in and build a lot of houses, and then they have to build several of them, some fraction of them, that are below market rate. And theoretically, they are earmarked by something on the title so they cannot be sold at above that rate in the future. However, apparently that does not always happen. So it's very difficult to enforce them if the title company does not have anything on the title that says, hey, this is a BMR. So people buy them cheap, sell them dear, and then they're lost to the BMR program, which is not good. And this is going to be another tracking nightmare, I suspect. And I haven't heard any real discussion on how that's going to go, other than something which really upset me, which was apparently one of the techniques for enforcement is very similar to the Texas law on abortion, where you don't have anybody official doing it. You just have vigilantes who point out that somebody helped somebody else get an abortion, and then they get the reward. And as I read through the details of this ordinance, it turns out that if some nonprofit, some supposedly qualified nonprofit, discovers that some individual has sold their house essentially against the rules, they can raise the hue and cry and point out the infraction. And then there's typically a very large penalty for the homeowner doing so. And it's collected by the whistleblower. It does not sound like a healthy way to encourage enforcement. Maybe it's cheaper, but I would hope we haven't stooped that low yet. So that's what I had to say for now.
Okay, thanks, Court. I think you're raising some very good points, and this is one of the issues when they try to sneak a ordinance past us on a Tuesday night, right before the RBD discussion, and nobody had actually heard of this. So I'll believe it when I see it in writing with the ordinance. But what we have right now from the city, all of this is included: ADUs, single-family homes. The people who wrote this are in the ADU business. I presume that they would have had a cutout if they were really concerned about that. I'm going to go to Estela Guerrero next.
Hi, I'm Stella Guerrero, and I live here in East Palo Alto. And my father passed away in February, so we've had his house for sale. No one's been living in it since then. And if this law passes, the question is also, does the house fall under this new ordinance, or is it grandfathered out? We haven't rented it out yet because it hasn't sold, but we're thinking about it. So if we rent it out, for sure it's going to fall under that ordinance. So I'm sure other families are in the same spot. But that's another concern that I had that I haven't heard come up on any of the questionnaires or other questions from other people. So that's something else to look at, homes that are in trust. So that's it for now, but thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Estella. That's a great point, and it's one of the scenarios, where this, when you do a ordinance that's so incredibly broad like this, there's going to be all sorts of things that people don't necessarily think about on first pass, and it's going to end up stinging, and you're creating all sorts more problems than it's trying to solve. Robert, did you want to speak? You have your hand up.
Yes, I did. And the last speaker and the speaker before kind of hit upon something. I'm looking at the staff report, and I don't know what page it's on. It's kind of like midway through the staff report, and it talked about, and I'm gonna read this one little sentence, two sentences that what it says. It said applicability on single-family homes without tenants. Without tenants. It says under the recommended EPA OPA policy, the owner of a single-family home without tenants is required to provide all potential eligible buyers, for example, qualified nonprofits and the city, with a notice of intent to sell. All potential eligible buyers are allowed to submit a statement of interest to purchase. And that starts that whole chain of events and time frame But with what they're writing, what they're saying here is that if if you don't have a tenant and you in the house, you put the owner put your house up, you will fall under this requirement. And so that's even is hooking everybody in the homeowners in the community back into this process somehow. So I just want to bring that up.
Well, thanks, Robert. I think one of the other points in this that's really concerning is that, you know, if you post on social media that your house is for sale, somebody pointed out that that's $1,000 a day fine. There's all these penalties in this ordinance for very commonplace behavior, like trying to sell your house. If you don't secretly tell them, hey, we're going to sell your house, and then you actually post it on social media or through listing service, I mean, it's like, you know, the concern seems absurd that somebody would try to sell their house. Why don't we go to Martin Aruraj? Let me unmute you.
Yes, this is Martin Arulraj. Hey, I'm a resident of East Palo Alto for the past 4 years, and I have a specific question. Actually, Bob Jones just brought it up. So I read that ordinance. It talks about the vacant, the tenant without tenant, without the properties without tenants, but absentee owners. Yeah, so that kind of bust me a little, because it brings all the properties, and they haven't clearly defined exactly what those properties are. The ordinance is poorly written in that sense. And second thing, so and then if you look at the penalties, every penalty is actually comes back to the litigation. There is no city managed person who says who acts as an intermediator, or what's the exact term? I forgot the exact term. Who manages this? Instead, it has to be sued in the court of litigation. So what that does is it creates a threat of litigation, not actually the litigation. It creates a threat of litigation for any property that is owned that is rented out or it's vacant. So these threat of litigation it can be used as an extortion. Any nonprofit can say, if they know that this property is vacant, they can talk to the homeowners that they want to instead, if you don't want it, you can contribute some money to it, and that will be perfectly legal, because contributing to nonprofit is perfectly legal, and the threat of litigation is perfectly legal, and this will exactly happen that way. And that is exactly happened with the Washington DC. So the Washington DC initially had the single family homes in their ordinance. But what happened in the last two years after they introduced it, there is a small cottage industry that sprung up, that chased who the COPA properties are, and asked them to sign their rights to them, and they created a threat of litigation to extract thousands of dollars for the tenants. So this is exactly we cannot have that kind of threat of litigation. It's just not right. And third thing is strategy that I want to talk about. So the Carlos Romero, from what I observed from the meeting, is the Carlos Romero and Rubin Abrisha are the two people who's pushing this the most. And the Carlos Romero and the meeting, some people has brought up the case that the EPA is the murder capital of the world, and also that buying the property here to develop the EPA. That's just nonsense. That's not true, and that is nonsense. And it's counterproductive, because it will force Carlos Romero to brand us as someone like some racist or something like that, and then make the other voters, I mean the other city councilmen, even if they wanted to vote against the ordinance, it will make their life difficult politically. So we cannot have that counterproductive arguments when we talk to the city council. We have to engage the community. I mean, as Coach Skinner said, we have to talk to the people who wants to have the ordinance. We want them to answer our questions, in the sense, how do you prevent this extortion? How do you prevent this? We can ask them questions. I mean, how do you prevent this appraisal value going down? and loan issues. So initially, when Carlos Romero said that he's open to dropping the appraisal process, that is a positive step. But then I thought initially that even if the appraisal process steps and if we can shrink down the timeline, we can actually make something that's practically it doesn't applicable to many properties, but we can reduce the impact of this law. But then after reading about the Washington DC TOPA and COPA, I don't think we can have this ordinance because the threat of litigation will always be there for a single family home. The big corporations, they are fine, they can litigate it, but average family cannot litigate this. That's all.
All right, thank you so much. Those are, I think, very valid concerns. Maybe Maya Brusil would like to talk. I'm trying to unmute Maya, and it's not, doesn't seem to be working. So.
Yes, Mark, I unmuted myself. Give me another 10 minutes and then give me opportunity to talk because I'm almost home. I'm driving.
All righty, let's go to Nina Helmer then next. Does Nina?
Unmute, yeah. I really appreciate everybody's effort. You know, I attended the last council meeting. I'm very surprised about the mayor and some of the city council members' attitude. What I'm afraid about the decision will be made by undemocratic approach, because as a male sounds like a very, very strong. The other council member may, I don't know the structure of the council, they may feel bullied and feel intimidated. I don't know how the council meeting will work. You know, that's what I'm afraid of. Yeah, maybe some people want to vote against that, but because mayor is so strong, and the other council member may have to say yes. So this is something I'm worried about. And there's any way to guarantee a council member will vote without the imitation of the mayor. So this is one question I try to raise. Another concern is about I really not happy about the mayor talk about the investor being cause the displacement. It's not an investor. I think for myself, you know, I actually host 8 people in the one rental house. So actually it's to keep the family in the area instead of let them move out. They are working class, very nice people. So I just don't like him say, you know, I think anyway we can sue him for saying that. It's not a reality, you know, it's like deflame the investor. So we are not destroying East Palo Alto. We are building the East Palo Alto. I think the government is destroying the East Palo Alto. I also work at the DC before. I know how bad DC was. The southeast part of DC is really bad. I worked with a lot of foster care family. So I know how bad the government had done to DC. So I think that's why they try to destroy East Palo Alto. So we lived in the communist party country in China before. I know how they use less fortunate people to have the revolution, and then they become corrupted themselves. So that's what I'm afraid the mayor will do the same thing. So that's what my comment. Thank you.
Thank you. Grace, you have your hand up.
Yes, thank you. There's an aspect that hasn't been discussed today, which I think is really interesting. the way that this is set up, we've described there are lots of penalties against homeowners who at some stage don't do something quite right or quite on time in a quite lengthy and complicated process. There are no penalties for the non-profits in this. And indeed, for anyone who's bought a home, you put up earnest money to buy the home. And if somehow you weren't able to perform, if your loan wasn't able to close and you weren't going to be able to buy that home on time, you could lose that earnest money. It was probably 3% of the value of the home, and it mattered to you a lot. In the way that this is written, the maximum that the seller will see that go to title for earnest money from the nonprofit is 1%, and it is refundable if the nonprofit doesn't complete the transaction. So there is absolutely no incentive for the nonprofit not to say, we're going to try and buy this thing under right of first refusal, because they can just give it a go. And then if they don't have the funding and it doesn't close, they lose nothing at all. And the seller gets absolutely nothing to help them with the time that the property hasn't been able to sell. It's been vacant, it's been open. That hasn't been covered. I don't know which council member may be persuaded that this is a very, very stacked, unfair situation against people who own property in East Palo Alto and who are treated this way. But that's just another topic it seems to me to matter a lot, because we know that if there's no incentive not to engage, to try to go down the path of a transaction, people will do it. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Let me see, anyone else? A Chain.
Yes, hi. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, my name's Alden. Sorry. When I registered, it was easy to put A there.
We can only just hear you. Can you speak any louder?
Can you hear me now? Let me adjust my settings. Hold on. Can you hear me better? I'm trying to get closer to this to the microphone. Okay. First of all, my name is Alden, and I want to thank all of you because it's really impressive in terms of what you've done in 2 weeks to put together a website. The organization is really impressive. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, everyone, for doing so. I wanted to get to, and I'm a homeowner. I don't live in East Palo Alto, but I have a home that I'm trying to remodel right now. And I have an interest to see East Palo Alto grow. And I wanted to get to Grace's question a while back, which is what can we do? And it sounds like what can we do to make sure that our points are heard? And what can we do to, I guess, essentially counter something that to me is grossly unfair to homeowners and to residents of East Palo Alto? I think you've already started such a great organization already as it is. So I think just throwing this out here, a couple of things. One is the marketing aspect of it. And it looks like Washington, D.C. was mentioned a couple of times. And if a case study can be done in a sort of a professional, academic kind of looking way, that can be used as a way to show East Palo Alto that, this is not going to work. And by doing so, there's a couple of advantages. You don't end up making it us versus them. It's more of saying, hey, this is a case study. This is what happens. Is this what you want to happen? We're not talking about, one party being bad, another party being good. It sort of makes it a neutral position. The other thing I think ultimately to help influence the council is it comes down to votes and whether they're going to be voted or not. Just looking at the numbers, we have 80 homeowners you've gotten so far, which is tremendous. East Palo Alto has about 800 households, 8,000 households. So I guess if we just look at the numbers, how can we increase that number, right? How can we get to 20, 30%? I don't know the answer, but I'm just sort of kind of looking at how can we make sure that our viewpoints are heard to others so that when it comes time to vote, that's when it really counts. The third aspect that I wanted to bring up is in terms of council meetings, is just speaking up. If you could have more and more people speak up and having all these talking points that you guys have already, and just having people, one person after another speak up, I got to believe that the council members can actually, are going to take notice if you're going to see that many people speak up against us, because this is clearly something that is not going to work. And I think if we do speak up, also mention what are the pros and cons for the city. Forget about the homeowners for a moment. If you think about revenues, the tax base for houses, right? That primarily funds, if I'm not correct, schools, right? And if you decrease the revenue base for schools, which is to me a top priority, especially for East Palo Alto, if you look at the working class community, because if you look at how many, they're working 2 or 3 jobs, right? And my heart goes out to them. Actually, it's hard. They don't have time to take care of their kids. So really, schools should be a top priority for them. And I don't know if we can somehow say that a vote for this is actually a vote against schools. I don't know how to mark it. I don't know how to say it. But the bottom line is that's one of the consequences I feel that's going to happen, because you're going to get a lot of it. You're going to shift the power to these nonprofits, and you're also going to reduce and affect they're basically trying to get the housing prices down. Right?
I think you're right on that. And defunding the government and defunding schools is not their way forward. With that in mind, why don't we move on to Al J, who's had his hand up for a while. Al, why don't you go ahead?
Yeah, thanks. I just wanted to just recap some of the points that I heard here, and also just add a couple of thoughts that I had. So I am a homeowner in EPA, and I have talked to some of my neighbors who are also homeowners, and everyone's pretty concerned. One of the things I think people say, well, I'm not renting my house, or I don't have an ADU, so why would I be concerned? And I think, as has been pointed out, the housing market is connected, and as you mentioned, when people get comparables, it's not, oh, well, this one was rented once and this one wasn't. So even if you don't rent right now or have an ADU, it does affect you if you're a homeowner, and it will, these effects of lowering the property values will affect everybody, every homeowner in EPA, right? And, the second thing, even the city as a whole, it was mentioned that it kind of makes it EPA more undesirable. And that also hurts the city. I think it hurts everybody, renters, middle income, low income, everybody. So I think that's also a concern I have. I've seen, changes in EPA, and I do not want to see it become more undesirable. That's for sure. And I think nobody does. I think another concern I have is these, the organizations, and as soon as you say you can transfer, so if it was literally just a tenant who wants to become an owner, I'm very supportive, and I would like to see programs that help tenants who are in a position to make that step. But when you have these organizations, and I can trade the right, and, as was mentioned, like, who are these organizations? Who qualifies them? Where is the transparency on these organizations? And what's their accountability? And, human nature is what it is. There can be bias. And also when you say, well, a city paid, appraiser can decide my sale price. For me, that's just a huge red flag, because, human nature is what it is. There can be bias when we have all these organizations and trading the rights, and people mentioned in DC, there's, a whole cottage industry springs up, and, corruption can be just, hey, I call my friend, okay, well, there's this house on, and maybe our organization can get it, and then we can, get something for you. So it just doesn't seem like it seems like something that actually can create, bias and corruption. And, the last point I have is, some people who haven't lived in other parts of the world, but, it was mentioned, China and so on. I just happened to be talking to someone who is, Xi Jinping in China is also trying to bring down home prices. Even there, they actually did not dictate the price. They were giving suggested price and then creating incentives around leverage and so on. So even, literally communist China is not dictating the sale price of your home. And I think, honestly, I think there's a principle, a really important principle, back to, the Constitution and the founding of the United States, the right to own, improve, and even dispose of property is very, very fundamental. And the city should not be setting sale prices. Just as a point of principle, they should not be involved in that. They should not be dictating who you can sell your property to. It's basically, it's not American. It's not the American way. And I'm concerned. For me, it's a big red flag. So I think after that, it's just the issues that people mentioned. Okay, what do we do about it? Have we reached the, if there's 3,600 homeowners in EPA, how many have we reached, and so on. So those were my comments that I wanted to share.
Yeah, thank you. And I think one of the things is I got a call on a Tuesday and put out the word on this, and kind of have been, for better or for worse, kind of at the pivot point between a lot of different groups. And one of the things I've really noticed is how strongly a lot of immigrants have reacted to this. Immigrants from China, Russia, Mexico, other places where state interference has made a gargantuan difference in people's lives. And they've seen it before in other places. They don't want to see it here. And with that, why don't we go to Domingo Huerta?
Hi, I have a question that how this ordinance would apply to like month-to-month rentals. Because it's not a lease. Those people like that have on month-to-month rentals, and when I have rented in the past, that's the way I always preferred to do it. What would that also be? How would that be covered, or is it included in this ordinance? Because I think that would be I would never sign a lease with anyone now.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure, and maybe somebody else would want to take a whack at this. Bob Jones, who's a expert in housing, may have thoughts, but I think any kind of lease, any kind of rental would be covered by that. Robert, what do you have to say? I guess he's muted.
Okay.
Robert, do you have any thoughts on that as a month-to-month?
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Versus a long-term lease. It looks like, according to this, what the city have here, it doesn't really matter. Rental situation, that's when everything comes into play. You can rent for a year, you can rent for 1 month. It seemed like in the ordinance, what I read, it doesn't matter. Once you create that lease agreement or rental agreement, the month-to-month tenancy or a year-long lease, that's when it's going to kick in. Like I say, what I read earlier, it really doesn't matter where you leasing the property out or just a homeowner. This process is going to continue. And I think part of, as a homeowner, the key to me is that where I see the level of frustration is that it gets back to someone, I think two speakers earlier, talk about creating this taking property off the market, out of the market, creating this trust that would keep the property, that real estate, and just what if they were able to get, I think that there was a number thrown out there, 1,100 of the current rental units out there are rental. What if they get 500 units, 500 homes off the market, off for forever affordable into this land trust? It would never, the city would never see that income from those units. And Mark, it gets back to your number, the calculations, and I'm not an expert in numbers, but if those calculations were ran, it really would show, it should show the city how they're shooting themselves in the foot if they were to go down this road.
Yeah, I think one of the big issues that a lot of people have is they've done no economic analysis whatsoever of this ordinance. So it's really hard to say what it would do and what it wouldn't do when you haven't even contemplated best case scenarios and worst case scenarios. So if this ordinance was in place for 20 years, what is it going to look like? If it's in place for 30 years, what's it going to look like? I mean, you could really easily see the numbers getting up. If there's 10 properties a year over, 10 to 15 properties a year over 30 years, suddenly you have a quarter of the housing stock, becoming not paying taxes. Drake Diedrich, why don't you go ahead and chat?
Hey, so I wanted to say that this is directly affecting me. I helped my parents purchase a home about 90 minutes from here this summer. And under the terms of the loan that we had to get, that has to become my primary residence. We closed in September, and then this started being discussed in October. And we had plans that we were going to try to fix this house up and then rent it out, and all of that is now shot down. But I also wanted to say that we have a number of attacks against this to stop it. There's politically, we're organizing, we will go and voice and express our displeasure, and there's a lot of us. Procedurally, they made a lot of mistakes doing this, the short notification and all the potential conflicts of interest. If that doesn't go, we can go all the way up to the Supreme Court and the takings clause of the Constitution, which I'll quote right now. Nor shall private property be taken for public use without just compensation. And an interpretation from 1960 from the Supreme Court said, the Fifth Amendment's takings clause was designed to bar government from forcing some people alone to bear public burdens, which in all fairness and justice should be borne by the public as a whole. These assets, these homes, are what we will use to pay for big disasters that may befall our family. I know a number of people who've lost their homes and had to sell them, but they could, and they were able to legally defend a grandchild or save a parent's life with very expensive surgeries, or care for long-term health consequences that one of their children have had. This is a direct attack on my children. This is their asset. This is here to protect them and give them some resources in a country that doesn't do that. And they're coming after it. They're coming after my children in my home right now. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Drake. Those are very important points. And I think a lot of people feel that way. I certainly do, that my son's inheritance is the property we've purchased in East Palo Alto. We invested in East Palo Alto. I remember saying to my wife, well, should we buy Apple stock? Should we buy Facebook stock, or should we buy in East Palo Alto? Nobody's going to come after your Apple stock if we had taken the down payment money and put it in Apple. So this is definitely penalizing people who have invested in East Palo Alto, who have created housing and have been paying taxes. And I just wrote my property tax bill for the two houses we own this past weekend. I'm happy to do that. I'm happy to pay taxes and for the lifestyle that we have. Let's see, who else has their hands up? Thomas Ma has his hand up.
Yeah, this is Thomas Ma. Can you hear me?
We can, yes.
Okay. Yeah, so far I heard all the homeowners or landlords, they talk against this ordinance. But do we know any tenants, should we communicate with all the renters to tell them this ordinance only benefit the nonprofit organizations, but they will defund money to the public schools. So if we can get any renters to speak up against the ordinance in any of the public meetings or city council meetings, that'd be powerful. That's just my thought. See if that's possible. Yeah,
That's a great point. And I think this ordinance is negative effect on a lot of people, and it benefits very few, and those few happen to be the ones that wrote it. Great. So you have your hand up, and I think Zenab had her hand up as well. Did you guys want to say something?
I would love to talk, Mark.
Maya. Yeah, I defer to Maya.
To me?
Go ahead, Maya.
Okay, so it's a lot of questions. I will be straight to the point. What can be done next? I have spreadsheets. Mark already have them as well. I sent him of all the homeowners of East Palo Alto. It's owner occupied and absentee owners, 2 spreadsheets. I find the company today who can, for a fee, give me all emails of those homeowners. We decided only to order homeowners for now who purchased homes within the last 3 years, because that's when we skyrocketed in pricing and become so much desirable as a city. I live myself in East Palo Alto. We do have a home in Belmont, but my husband loves East Palo Alto, and we want to live here. So first of all, we will email all the homeowners. Mark has a spreadsheet system that he will be able to send mass emails. I believe it's over 1,000. So that would be step number 1. We do need time for that though, not the 2 days, but at least a week. We do have, I started a petition that we already have 300 signers for that petition. Please keep signing, keep sharing it. This petition will be forwarded to City Council tomorrow, or probably, yes, tomorrow, because, correct, Mark? Tomorrow, right? We need to forward the petition to the City Council.
Well, City Council will vote on this next Tuesday, or they'll bring it up again next Tuesday. I believe it's the continuation of the first reading.
Okay, so we still have like 5 days to sign. Please keep signing. Everybody should get the petition. So I think within emails, we can also do door hangers, and we will go at least what we can do door to door and put the door hangers, because not everybody would open the door. So what I think the biggest thing that we shouldn't discuss which type of homes will be included and affected, because everybody, every single homeowner will be badly affected, because all our homes would go down in price. I'm a realtor and I exactly know the process. Anybody who is interested, I can explain in details. The only thing, yes, by the way, I already have people who decided not to purchase homes in East Palo Alto until the resolution of this matter. So it already shows what's going on. So the only thing I want to finish with a joke that I think we should be thankful to our mayor that we started building our strong East Palo Alto community. Thank you, Mark, for the beginning. And we all need to get involved. So we all raised our hands and united. This is not the only thing that we have to resolve, but let's start with City Council not be able to put this law in order. And the next one, we do need to think how they were chosen. I applied for a seat and I wasn't even considered. And no one from the city, mayor does not live in East Palo Alto. Why do we have a mayor who doesn't belong to our city?
All right, thank you, Maya. Why don't we, Dennis Parker, it looks like he has his hand up. Dennis, did you want to put your 2 cents in? You there, Dennis?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Yes, I just want to say a little bit about this proposal. I heard about it the last city council meeting.
Is
I
this,
didn't know
by the
what
way,
it was all about.
is this Luella?
Yes, it is. Hi.
Hi. It didn't sound like Dennis.
Anyway, I'm concerned about this ordinance. It's trying to come into place. I don't feel good about this at all. When I heard it last city council meeting, it disturbed me so much. And I don't know a lot about property, but I own my house. And it sounded like it was only talking about nonprofit buying property. Then it was single dwelling houses. So I felt really bad because it felt like they were taking my privacy away and my everything, about my house. I had to, they just wanted to put all these ordinance and constraints on us who own a house. And that doesn't feel good with me. I worked hard to pay for a house. And I remember back in the day as a little girl sitting by my grandfather's on his porch saying, always own your house, own your property. So why are they putting all these constraints on a person that own a house now? That just does not feel good. And I'm gonna vote against it.
All right.
So
Thank you.
I like what I heard everybody talking tonight. And I'm all for it. Bob did a good job, and Mark did a good job. Court Skinner did a good job, and Grace. So this thing doesn't feel good. It seems like it was put together real fast, and they didn't, a lot of people last week didn't even know about it, and I was included. That's the first time I heard about this. So it just doesn't feel right at all. I don't think they studied this thing out, and this is the only city doing something like this in this area. I've never heard of such. Although they said they did it back in DC and in San Francisco, but I didn't know about it. Anyway, that's my take. So thank you.
Thank you, Luella. And say hi to Dennis for me.
I will.
All righty. Let's see if there's any other hands up. People
Hi,
have...
Dennis. Mark said tell you hi.
Hi, Mark.
Hi, Dennis. All righty. Let me do this. I think at this point we should probably talk about wrapping up unless there's anyone else has something to say. Ideally, somebody who hasn't spoken before. But I guess what are next steps? And we have a meeting with city staff on Wednesday. I encourage everybody who can to attend that. There's a lot of questions we have, for city staff, and my primary one is, why were homeowners and other property owners not consulted in this process at all? And why were people who know about everything not consulted? People like Court, people. I mean, I follow things closely, not fanatically, but this impacts me and impacts everybody who spoke tonight. And there's been over 115 people who showed up to watch this tonight instead of watching Monday Night Football. I guess Seattle versus Washington football team may not be that as compelling as this. But what are next steps? Definitely, Wednesday, meeting with city staff, show up, give them a piece of your mind, let them know what you think about this. If you don't know what the meeting is, you can either message me or check any East Palo Alto neighbors or next door or any of the other social media channels. We'll get it out there. Second step is next Tuesday, December 7th, there is city council. Definitely show up and talk there. Contact your city council members. Let them know what you think, because it's kind of unacceptable that something like this is sprung on. I can envision an opportunity to purchase act that would be acceptable to homeowners if it didn't put a gun to our head and say you have to sell at a certain price. And then, depending on what I've said is that you have to let the political side play out. And if I had to guess right now, I'd say that they're either going to vote it down or they're going to punt it to study for the next 2 years to come up with a better ordinance. But if it does pass, we're already in contact with lawyers. A variety of people have been talking to lawyers. This is lawsuit material. And one of the concerns that I have for the city is that, how much have you budgeted if you're the city manager for lawsuits? Because there's so many holes in this ordinance and any ordinance that you could end up litigating over this instead of solving the very real problems of the community. And then, down the road, we're definitely going to keep staff and city council members accountable for what they do on this, because it's unacceptable what's happened. It's unacceptable that this came up without any notice to the community. And it's also, aimed squarely at one group of people, which is a huge group of people, to benefit a very small group of people, the folks that want to run these land trusts and nonprofits. I don't see how in any way this is a win for renters. It's not a win for tenants. It's not a win for people who want to stay in the community and are at risk of displacement. It's a bad ordinance. And so we need to make sure that people know that. So show up. I'm more than happy to open it up if anyone has further thoughts. But that's how I see it. I definitely did not want to spend Thanksgiving talking to people about this ordinance instead of enjoying myself with some downtime. But this was a very concerted effort on the part of Carlos Romero to get this ordinance passed when people were not looking. They were focused on the holidays. They were focused on the RBD. So it magically appeared one night. And I have some real concerns about city staff that went along with it. It's a big deal, and to not have outreach to the community. I know for a fact that the landlord of 1,800 units did not have any notice of this ordinance, and they're obviously impacted on us. But talking to them, they said, "Hey, this isn't aimed at us. It's aimed at you. It's aimed at you, the homeowner. It's not, our deals take 2 years to close anyway and involve billions of dollars. So we're not really worried about this, but this is something you should be." So that's all I have. I think we can wrap up. I appreciate everybody for taking the time. Certainly appreciate Grace, Federico, Zenab, and a variety of other people who have been very helpful. I maybe have been the focal point for this, but I'm certainly not the only one who's working on this. So we're going to get a small group together to be kind of a steering committee for this, and we'll be reaching out to people to get that going. If legal action needs to be taken, that's an entirely different step, but one that we're very willing to take. But anyway, show up at the meeting, sign the petition, and thanks everybody. Especially thank you to Abel and Karina for doing the Spanish language translation. And, we'll try to get this out in video format and get it on YouTube and all the other places. But thanks, everybody. I'll end this in a little bit.
Thank you, Mark, for organizing.
Thank you, Mark. Can you please email all of us minutes of this meeting?
I'll certainly do that. Yeah. And then, sign the petition and show up at the meetings. This is where it's very important to show up and to actually make the presence known on these Zoom calls. And, I guess shame on the city for thinking that they could pass an ordinance like this in the times of coronavirus, where no one can actually show up at City Hall and actually look them in the eyes and say, this is wrong. Why are you doing it? So thanks, everybody. And we'll definitely be in touch.
What
Thank you,
time is
Mark.
the meeting?
Yeah, great job.
Yeah, a meeting is at 6 o'clock on Wednesday, and then next week with city council meetings. I think typically Court would be more of an expert on that, but they'll probably take it up somewhere around 7 or 7:30. But we can definitely stay in touch and let people know when it's coming up. Sometimes measures like this they'll push to 11 o'clock at night so that people don't actually show up. So.
But on the 1st, this should be the only topic, should it not? So this would be therefore at 6 o'clock, the informational meeting this week.
Yes, the informational meeting on Wednesday will be at 6 p.m. Yes.
Yes.
So, all right.
So if you can make an early time, that's the one you have to make.
Absolutely. Thanks, everybody. I'm going to end the meeting.
Thank you.
See you, Mark.
Thank you, Mark.